All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. Today, we are going to be going over the Frank FDR administration. We're going to be looking at some of the people he had as advisors and some things that were unique that no other president has done up to this point into the 1930s. Okay. Now, let's go to the warm up. All right. So the first question asks you, um, what do you see here? To analyze the picture, tell me what you see. There's little tags everywhere, on the guy's the big hand. There's a little tag coming off that. On the pan, there's some writing, and from the steam, uh, there's writing. Even on the guy, it says on his shirt. I don't know if you can see it because of your phone, but it says voter. Okay. The second question asks you, what do you think this artist is trying to say about FDR? Okay, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. What do you think this artist is trying to say? Now, one student pointed out something that I thought all you guys saw this, but apparently a lot of the students in the class didn't really realize it. But the guy is not in the pan; he's on the edge. So it's like he's doesn't know if he wants to jump off or if he wants to stay in the pan. Okay, so if you look, his knees are bent. So that tells you he's not in the pan, he's on the edge. Okay, so that should help you out. Okay, so write your response, pause the video because we're moving on in three, two, one. All right, so the economy actually started to show signs of progress as early as 1933. So the year that FDR took over, some places were actually starting to show signs of improvement. Not every single place. Like I said in class, it's like if you got a dart and threw it on a map of the US, maybe a place like that was doing better, than before when the Great Depression first started. But it was far and in between. As years went on, yes, things started getting better all across the country. Again, some places were hurting more than others, but still, it was better than it was before. All right. Now, in 1937, things are starting to progress really well, and what happens is the the Federal Reserve, the people who are in charge of the money situation in our country, they were like, oh, well, look at, hey, things are going better. Let's raise the interest rates. And they raise it up in hopes that the government can then get money from taxes and things like that. And what ends up happening is they get too greedy and they raise the rates too high, and the economy starts to crash again. And it set them back several years. Doing that one incident, that one thing, um, set back the recovery from the Great Depression several years. Okay, so when we have a recession like we have right now, exactly in on the news today, May 5th, 2022, the Federal Reserve is talking about raising the interest rates. You know, they're actually like going to do it, raise it up a little bit because they looked in the past and said, you know what, we can't raise it too high. That's going to destroy everything. If we're going to go up, we need to go up just a little bit, tiny bit. Okay. Now, during this time, there's some noise coming from overseas, especially in Germany. There's noise about this new leader called Adolf Hitler. And some people are making noise because they're hearing that this guy is anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, and he's talking about, um, you know, bringing Germany back to the so-called pure race people, you know. And the thing is, he did, in a sense, bring Germany back to the way it was before. They got out of the depression a little bit quicker than some other countries. But again, there was talk about mistreatment of people, specifically Jewish people. Now, again, a lot of people around the country, it just goes in one ear out the other because, again, what's happening around the world, they could care less. They're more concerned about putting food on the table for their kids and their family than they are about some German guy overseas that has nothing to do with their everyday life. But again, people are hearing some things, and some people are paying attention, a lot aren't at this point. Okay. And eventually, it would get to the point in 1939 that war breaks out because Germany invades Poland. So keep that in the back of your head, okay? Now, FDR changes the WPA. So if you remember from the last class, the WPA, they were in charge of, you know, rebuilding roads, bridges, cleaning up the national forest, you know, things like that, building dams. They went from that to strengthening up the military institutions, bases and forts and things like that, and also building things like planes and tanks and jeeps and things like that, you know. And some people are like, wait, are we going to war? And it's like, no, 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 we're neutral. What's going on in Europe, that's their thing. We are neutral. But it's like, why are we building all this stuff for? You know, so some people started paying attention, some people didn't. Again, a lot of people didn't. They just, hey, fine, this is what my job got to be. I'll do it. So here's my question to you. How would you react if you found out our president was secretly strengthening our military bases, creating ships, planes, and other military equipment when we're at peace, but there's a war going on overseas? So in class, I was saying stuff like the Russia-Ukraine incident, what's happening right now. Like, let's say we found out, it comes out on the newspapers, it comes out on the news that Biden has been, for the past 5 months, making sure our forts and bases are strong, that they put anti-missiles, anti-airplane guns. You know, they built more ships, they built more planes, they've made more guns and ammunition. You know, but we're at peace. We're not in this war, but there is a war going on. How would you feel? How would you react? Would you be shocked? Would you be like, what are we getting? Wait, are we going to war? Are we going to war? You know, are we going to sell this stuff? You know, or what are we doing with this stuff? Is it just for us? What, I mean, what's going on? How would you react? Okay, so tell me that. The writing prompt's right there for you. So go ahead, write your response. Okay, because we're moving on in three, two, one. Now we're going to talk about women for a little bit here. At this time in the 1930s, women were unlike their mothers in the past. You know, a lot of these women in the 1930s, their mothers were staying at home, you know, cleaning the home, had dinner ready when the husband came, watched over the kids, you know, took care of the family stuff. And now, because of the Great Depression, women had to work to help out the family. You know, they had to help out pay the bills and things like that because the man couldn't do it by himself now. You know, so some families, they if they didn't have enough money, they would, you know, sell their kids or send their kids off to a family member. And some families, they were split up all across the country and they never saw each other again. You know, so it's a sad situation. And women, you know, put on their work boots and they went to work to make sure that their family stayed together. Here's a fun little interesting fact: 22% 22% decline in marriages happened between 1929 and 1939. So during the Great Depression, the number of people who were getting married dropped. And the thing is, statistically, it was easier for a single woman to survive than a married woman, whether she had kids or not. It was a lot easier for her to survive on her own. Because again, you have to remember, these women were taught from their mothers how to cook, how to clean, how to do this and that, how to do 5 things at one time. So they had no problem going to work, coming home, doing other things that they had to do, you know. Whereas a man, you know, it was seen like as, you're not supposed to do that stuff. You're not supposed to be cleaning, doing that kind of stuff, you know, inside the house. That's a woman's job. So men were hurting, but women, they were fine. Okay. Now, if women were looking for a role model during this time, they didn't have to look far in this country. They just had to look straight to her, Eleanor Roosevelt, the first lady, uh, who was married to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Okay. Now, Eleanor, forgive my language, but she was a badass. Okay. This woman was awesome, tough as nails. Okay. One of her most famous quotes is, "No one has a right to make you feel inferior without your consent." Okay. In other words, she's saying no one has a right to make you feel small, less than, unless you allow them. When people say things, it's just words, but it's until you attach, you know, feelings to it, then that's when it hurts you. Specifically when it's negative things. If you just shrug it off, if you don't listen to it, it's just empty words. And that's what she's saying. No one can make you feel bad unless you allow them to. So, smart woman. Also, a little fun little fact that's not on here, but just a fun little fact. The second most famous woman was at that time is Betty Crocker. Here's the thing: Betty Crocker wasn't real. It's not a real woman at all. So the number one woman to get the most mail and fan letters was Eleanor Roosevelt. Number two was Betty Crocker, a lady who'd never existed. Okay. Um, but Eleanor Roosevelt was an advisor for FDR. She told him, "Hey, you should do this. You should consider this. Should consider that." And the thing is, he listened to her. You know, not every single time, but he did give her the time and did like contemplate what she was saying. Because again, she was a very smart woman. So he would sit there and think like, "No, maybe she's right." One of the things she said was, "Honey, you need to hire more women." Okay? If you look back at the history of our country, all the presidents had the same type of men. They had old white men telling them what to do. How can you change the country if you're getting the same information that the other presidents before you got? You need to have people with a different perspective on life, different points of view, who've experienced life differently. And he was like, she's right. She's right. So in his cabinet, he got this lady, Frances Perkins, to be in his cabinet. She is the first woman to ever hold a cabinet position in the executive branch. Now, hate to say it, ladies, still to this day, you guys are not paid exactly as men. Okay, you're not. It's sad to say this, but things have gotten better, especially since the 1930s. Women were paid less than men, but the jobs that were available to them were more stable than what guys had. Jobs available for women were like nursing, teaching, and then doing domestic work, sewing and things like that. So, um, I mean, people are always going to get hurt or sick, so nurses are always there. There's always going to be kids who need to be taught, how to read, write, do math, things like that. And also people need to get their clothes washed and stuff like that. And they don't have time, they can hire somebody. So the other thing that happened too was the U.S. government was actually hiring more women too, and they used them as secretaries. You know, the problem was too that the women who worked for the WPA didn't get the same jobs as the men because again, the men were cleaning the streets, fixing the roads, fixing the bridges, cleaning up in the forest. That was seen more as like a man's job. That's outside stuff. Men do that. Ha ha ha. Type of thing. Women, no, no, you guys be secretaries, you type, you file, you get things organized. So that was a thing. Okay. So here's my next question to you. What do you think the first lady's role should be? Should she be an advisor for the president? So should she be the one who's sitting there with him going, "Yeah, you know what? I think you should do this. I think you should do that." All right. Do you think she should be a diplomat? Someone who um, meets foreign guests, foreign ambassadors, kings, queens, shows them around town, you know, basically play host to them. Should they be a spokesman? Those type of people who go out and say, hey, we need to focus on, stop using drugs, get more kids to read, eat more healthy, become more active and exercising and stuff like that, you know. Or should she be an ornament? I hate to use that word, but that's the only thing I can think of. Should she just sit there, look pretty, like here's the president, here's his wife, the first lady, or should she just be his wife? Don't do anything politics. You're his wife. That's all you are. You're his wife. You don't have to be anything more. You don't have to be all political. You don't have to get involved in that crap. Just be his wife. Be, there for him. You know. So which one do you think and why? Now, like I told the other classes, um, yes, I understand that a woman might be president one day too. I honestly don't think it might happen. I don't think it might happen in my lifetime. Your lifetime, more than likely, but mine, probably not. But if there is a man, kind of first lady type of thing, the woman's president, um, would you say that about him? Absolutely. Absolutely. He's her husband. So should he be an advisor or a diplomat, a spokesman, an ornament, or just the husband? I say the same thing. So what do you think? What should their role be? The president's spouse. Let's use that. Okay. So pause the video, write your response because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right. So now we're going to talk about African Americans. So we talked about women. Now we're going to talk about African Americans. I hate to say it, but African Americans were really hurt bad, especially in the South. Oh, it was horrible for these poor people. All right. Basically, the only jobs they could get was farm working or domestic stuff. Domestic work being like sweeping the streets or shining shoes, things like that. I mean, that's all they could get. And the thing is, they weren't really included in the Social Security Act, which meant they really didn't have a safety net. So if they didn't work, they weren't getting a job, or sorry, they weren't getting money. So things were pretty bad. And like many other people, when they tried to get a job and they were hired, they were paid a lot less. So a white person might get $1. I don't know, basically say $1 an hour, maybe. I doubt it. Maybe 50 cents. Who knows? But the thing is, the African Americans got paid half of that. So yeah, it was pretty bad. Um, and many of the relief programs were not given to African Americans in the South because here's the thing: a lot of the people who are in charge of those programs, the politicians, the sheriffs, people of power, the white people of power back then at that time, a lot of them were racist. A lot of them were brought up with the notion that you are better than them. They are second class citizens. So the African Americans who needed help never got it. And again, not every single white person in the South was racist. Okay, I want to get that clear again. But the thing is, a lot of those people who were in power, um, they they didn't, you know, they didn't get it, and those white people who were in charge, were in fact racist. Okay. Now, thing is, Roosevelt, listening to his wife, he knew. Okay, well, I don't know exactly what these people are going through. You know, it's one thing to say, "Oh, I hear what you're saying, and I get what you're saying." It's one thing to understand; it's another thing to experience it. So he basically is like, I don't know how these African Americans, how they live. I don't know what they're experiencing. I don't know how a day in America is like in their eyes. So what he did was he decided to go and basically have a black cabinet. And the person in charge of it was this woman right here, Mary. I'm gonna kill this name, Bethune. Bethune. All right. Now, what her job was is to make sure that there was an advisor in every single program for the New Deal. So the WPA, the NRA, the TVA, all the programs that was under FDR's New Deal, she made sure that there was at least one black advisor in there. So people said, "Oh, let's build roads in this town." This advisor would be like, "Okay, where?" "Oh, we're thinking about the west side." "Okay, no, see that west side, they're fine. Look over here on this east side. That side is like crumbling, they're bad. And if you notice, that's the African American side of town. They should get new roads. They have dirt roads. This other place at least has paved roads. This other place has dirt, rocks, and things like that. So they need more of a road than these guys. So the number of African Americans who work for the government tripled, all because of this lady. Okay. All right. So here's my next question for you. We're talking about the cabinet of the president. Now, you have some choices here. Okay. Should the president have a one diverse cabinet to make sure every race, cultural, and ecological background are represented? Ecological background is basically people who are born rich, born middle class, poor, and everything in between. So people from different financial backgrounds, people who rich neighborhood, okay neighborhoods, ghetto neighborhoods, you know, should that be how the cabinets be? Every race, culture, and background should be represented. Or should the president have a cabinet of the people they feel will do the best job? Regardless of political party, regardless of, you know, um, who they are, where they're from, what race, whatever. As long as the president feels that they're going to do a good job, they give them the job. Or the next one, should the president have a cabinet of people who agrees with the president plans or agendas? The president has a plan for the country. Should they put people in charge, people in charge of like interior education who feel the same way he does, who have the same goal? Or last one, should the president have a cabinet filled with people who supported him through this campaign? So people who've been backing him up since the beginning, who believed in him since the beginning, um, all the way through, up until he became president. Um, should he fill his cabinet up with those type of people? So of those four, which one do you think? Okay, and explain why. Okay, so pause the video, write your response because we're moving on in three, two, one. All right, so this is an interesting thing. We're going back to women a little bit. So women really continued to work until the 1940s. All right. Now, 26 states placed this thing, a restriction known as the marriage bar. Okay. Now we're talking bar. We're not talking about like with drinks and things like that. We're talking about like a bar, like a metal bar. Um, it basically said that if you were a married woman, you should stay at home because hey, you got responsibilities at home. You got a husband. You need to be there to stay at the home, cook dinner, take care of the kids, clean, make sure the house is clean, things like that. And that more than likely a man should take your job. You know. Now, if a man did not want the job, then it should go to a single woman. Why a single woman? Because she doesn't have a family. She doesn't have a husband that's going to come home soon and things like that. She could have an apartment, and hey, she can take care of herself. You know. So some women claim to be single, but in reality, they were married. You know, and they went to extreme lengths to try to cover up that they were married. You know, um, and I believe, if I remember right, some places this continued on until the 1950s. All right. Problem is when a woman who was married who lost her job, and they offered it to a man didn't want it. A lot of men looked at it going, I don't want to do that, especially the pay. The pay is really low because they were going to pay them a woman's wage, So they're like, no. Now again, things progressed slowly, but it wasn't until 1942 that's when truly the Great Depression was over for the United States. So the United States goes over one hurdle, and then you're going to find that we are going to find ourselves into another one. Okay. All right. So here is your exit ticket question. Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." Do you believe that's true? Now, again, if you fast forwarded past all this stuff and you didn't hear me explain it earlier, you may want to go back when there was that picture of Eleanor Roosevelt and listen to that part of me explaining what that quote means if you don't understand it. If you want to try it on your own, if you passed it and you want to try to figure out what this quote means by yourself, by all means, look it up. Look at what inferior and consent means, okay? And then answer this question, all right? Once you've answered this exit ticket question, that's it for you. You've finished this lesson. So hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed this lesson. And that's it, right? So you guys, you take care, you be safe, and I'll see you guys later, okay?